MVC, Model View Controller. What does that mean? Well, I have here an MVC program. I'll show you how I made it in a moment, but if I just run it, then we get a web app. Now, if I now type in here this basically will open another page called the privacy page. So essentially speaking, an MVC app, web app, responds to a URL. So in this case it's responding to home, privacy, and that's really what an MVC program does. Well, other programs do the same thing, other web apps, but MVC is particularly specialized in doing that. I'll show you how to build this MVC in a moment, but for the moment let's take a look at what's being produced and what we've got. We've got M for models here, and in there we've got well, let's take a look at one of these models. We have models are essentially classes. It's a way of structuring data. So that's the model. We have a view. Now a view, you see we've got three folders here: the models, the views, and the controllers, and that's MVC. So the models, as we say, is a way of structuring our data. The views is a way of looking at data or web. It's a web page. For example, here we have an index page. Well, essentially they're HTML pages. Well, they're not quite. They're actually CS HTML, which means you can mix C# with HTML. But for the moment, let's just think of them as HTML pages, and we call those views. Finally, we have controllers. Now the controllers are the bit which respond to the URL. So I'll just take a look at the home controller, and we'll come back to explaining that in a moment. Indeed, that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to explain what a controller does, and just to forget about models and views for the moment. So let me quickly show you how to make an MVC program. I'll just close that one I've got at the moment, and we're going to make a new project. So it's File, and then create a new project, and it's going to be ASP, not, and we've got next, and then we'll call it SimpleMVC. We'll put it in a folder that we can easily find, and we're going to create an MVC. So there we go, MVC, Model View Controller, and we can simply create that web application. And if I run it, I eventually get, it's a home page, it appears, and I did show you before how you can type in here, you can type your URL and another page will open up, in this case the privacy page. Okay, so that's how the MVC program works. Let's investigate a bit further. What I'll do is actually start from scratch. I'm going to delete everything which is, well, it's not going to actually allow me, so I'll just exclude from the project from the moment, and same with any models, that I'll just exclude those from the project. They'll still be in the folder, but they won't take any part in the project. Similarly, so to all intents and to all intents and purposes, we've got empty folders there. Okay, so three folders which are empty at the moment. Now I'm going to completely ignore the models and the views and take a look at controllers. I'm going to make a controller, just a controller. That's all this program is going to have, and show you what it does. So if I right click on controllers, and then I can add a right click on the folder and add a controller, and we'll make an empty controller, and we'll just take a look and see what that looks like. Home controller, I'll call it home controller. I think that might have been taken up, so I'll just the first thing that comes into my head, I'll call it account. Now watch carefully as I make this controller. What it does, it produces, I'll call it account controller, and then add that. Now let's see what it's done. It's produced a class which is derived from the controller class, and it's produced this default index page, which I might actually delete just to simplify matters. Now what happens is that this website will respond to that part of the URL. Let me show you what that means. So if I run, I'll put a breakpoint in here. Before that, let me just put in one of my own methods. Now what is this? Well, this is a method which will respond to the URL. So let me just run it, and I'll put a breakpoint in here. It doesn't do very much, does it? It's just a void, the simplest possible function that I can have. And if I now run this somewhere, and then the web app runs, but let me try, I want to try and access that controller, and the way I do that is type in the word account. Now not account controller, but account, and then the name of the action or the function. Carefully type that in, account my action. Now when I press enter, you can see that it actually calls upon this function. Why? Because the name of the class is account controller, and it more or less parses the name out of there corresponding to that segment of the URL. Now the second part of the segment of the URL is actually the function which is going to be called. So once again, when I type in the name of the controller and the action to be performed, it finds this controller, and then it finds that particular action. Now concentrate very carefully on that. It's not account controller, it parses it and then finds the function. You can have other functions within there as well, other actions if you like, with different names, but the first part will be the controller name, which will find this particular class, and then the name of the action follows in the URL. So that's basically how a controller works. It's fairly straightforward actually. Now keeping things as simple as possible, what we're going to do now is to make a view, which is, as I said before, is just a basic web page. So to do that, I make sure I right click on the views folder and then add, need to. But first we'll create a folder, keeping in mind the controllers. We've got the account. So let's follow that hierarchy, and in our views I'm going to make a folder there called account. And in that folder I'm going to make my view, which is a CSHTML file, and I'm going to call that the same name as my action. Now I'm going to make my view absolutely as simple as possible. Just a bit of HTML text which should appear on the view. Now let's see if that indeed works. I'm going to run it, and then when my URL appears, to remind you what we've got in our controller, we've got the, I might as well put a breakpoint in here. Now what I've done is return this time a view, which is, I've inserted that code to return a view, which indeed was just my little bit of HTML we just saw, which is actually just that. So now I've changed that so that we've got it returning a view. So that ought to call that bit of HTML I just showed you. Now since it's returning a view, that is of the type, rather than being void, it's an iAction result. So I'll put a breakpoint in here and just remind you how we go about doing that. So I type in the account and then the name of the action, and then press enter, and you can see it's got into that breakpoint just there. So what I'll do is just continue it on, and there it is. The simplest bit of HTML you can have will appear on that particular page. So let me stop that. I could close the page if you like to stop my program, and let's take a look at my controller. And I want to talk about attributes. Now at the moment it will be accessed by the name of the controller, but what I can do is change that to using attributes, which are using square brackets, and then inside we need some inverted commas, and then the name of the tag is going to be, we can call it whatever we like, whatever we want to appear. Well, for example, my controller, and also we can change, well, let's see what happens when we run that. But before that we need to use some parentheses here. And type the word root, and then try that. Now let's remember this name, my controller. I might as well just copy that, and when I put a breakpoint in here I can run it. Now this time in the URL, instead of typing account, we put the new name of the controller, but we still have my action as the name of the action. Well, let's qualify the action as well. We'll give that a new name as well. So now when we run the web app, and I'll just place a breakpoint there, and now if we type in, I'll copy that, and I'll paste it into the URL segment, and also I'll copy this as our new action name, paste that in as well, and now when I press enter you can see that it stopped at that breakpoint here. And so my controller has superseded the name of account, and my action has superseded the name my action in here. My new action has superseded my action, If I continue to run that, of course, it should return my very simple HTML page, which was this bit of HTML here. So that just gives an idea how a controller works, really. We haven't mentioned model yet, and we'll do that soon. We'll introduce model, which introduces data. Also, I'm going to show you how to do a post as well. So far we've been using our URLs to access the function. The other way of doing it is by using what we call a post. So far we have been using what we call a get, and we'll use a post